It's literally one of the most fascinating and honestly deeply complex paradoxes in modern sports. Think about it. What does the treatment of generational superstars, like Kylian Mbappé, actually reveal about modern France, its ideals of citizenship, and maybe even Europe's unresolved colonial history? In this explainer, we're going to unpack exactly that. Because the massive gap between how these athletes are celebrated on the pitch and how they're treated off it tells us an incredible story about identity today.
To find our starting point, we got to rewind to the summer of 2018. Following France's amazing World Cup victory, South African comedian Trevor Noah went on his show and enthusiastically declared, "Africa won the World Cup." He was making this lighthearted, celebrative observation, just highlighting the fact that a huge majority of the French squad had direct African ancestry. For Noah, and honestly for a lot of fans globally, it was this moment of shared pride, a real nod to the continent's massive influence on global football.
Well, that joke, it immediately sparked a furious official response. The French ambassador to the United States, Gerard Araud, actually wrote a stern letter directly to Noah, and his core argument was blunt. He wrote, "By calling them an African team, it seems you are denying their Frenchness." Araud argued that the French Republic, by design, does not refer to its citizens by their race, religion, or origin. In the eyes of the state, there is absolutely no hyphenated identity. So, to the ambassador, Noah's joke was essentially legitimizing a white-only definition of Frenchness by suggesting these black players belong to Africa rather than France.
So, what does this all mean? This geopolitical spat actually perfectly frames a deeply human struggle. It's a concept that's often called the dual heart, because for pretty much every child of immigrants, there's this fundamental question hovering over them. Can you be both? Like, can you openly celebrate your African heritage while remaining unequivocally French? Or does society demand that you pick a side? Trevor Noah was basically asking, why can't they be both? While the French establishment essentially argued that highlighting one side automatically erases the other.
To really understand this tension, we've got to jump back to 1998. That was the year France won its very first World Cup. That team was led by Zinedine Zidane, and they were widely celebrated as the Black Blanc Bleu, or Black-White Arab, myth of a perfectly integrated France. In that 98 squad, 8 of the 22 players had ties to former colonies. At the time, it was hailed as this ultimate triumph of French multiculturalism.
But check out how those demographics shifted over the next 2 decades. By the 2018 tournament, 15 out of the 23 players on the winning French roster had personal histories directly tied to the African continent. We're talking about global superstars who became household names practically overnight. Guys like N'Golo Kanté, Paul Pogba, and of course the teenage phenom himself, Kylian Mbappé. Let's break those origins down just a bit further. 12 of these 23 players boasted direct ancestry spanning 9 different African nations, from Mali and Senegal to Algeria and the Democratic Republic of Congo. Yet, and this is the absolute crucial point the French ambassador was trying to make, nearly all of these players were born, raised, and learned to play football entirely within the borders of France. They are, for sure, legally and culturally French citizens.
Okay, moving on to Section 1, the banlieue reality.
So, where exactly in France are these incredible talents being nurtured? To get that, we have to understand the environments that raise them. The word banlieue literally just translates to suburb, but since the 1970s, the term has taken on a very specific and honestly a pretty stigmatized meaning. It usually denotes economically deprived areas with massive low-income housing projects home to large immigrant populations. Places like the 93rd Department or specific towns like Bondy, right where Kylian Mbappé grew up, are frequently demonized by 24-hour news channels as dangerous no-go zones. Yet, at the exact same time, these incredibly complex poverty traps operate as the world's absolute greatest talent incubators, churning out an unprecedented number of global football superstars. But you know, the systemic friction within these areas cannot be ignored. And in the fall of 2005, this friction was tragically laid bare. Police were investigating a break-in in Clichy-sous-Bois. A group of local teenagers, running away to avoid what they felt was just routine police harassment, hid in an electrical substation. Tragically, 2 boys, Bouna Traoré and Ziad Benna, were electrocuted. This heartbreaking event ignited 3 full weeks of nationwide riots, completely exposing the deep-seated frustrations over high unemployment, isolation, and police brutality within the banlieues.
Now, rather than addressing the systemic issues that actually sparked the unrest, the political response was deeply controversial. Then Interior Minister Nicolas Sarkozy famously labeled the rioting youth from these suburbs as racailles, which basically translates to thugs or scum. Critics argued that this warlike rhetoric only deepened the divide, creating an incredibly harsh social environment for the kids growing up in these districts. And remember, these are the exact same districts that go on to produce the nation's most celebrated football heroes.
Let's jump into Section 2, the 2022 Anti-Hero. Fast forward to the 2022 World Cup final in Qatar, and we see the rise of the modern anti-hero, Kylian Mbappé. In that final match, Mbappé delivered what is arguably one of the greatest individual performances in the history of the sport. He scored a historic hat-trick, literally becoming only the second man ever to pull that off in a World Cup final. He pretty much single-handedly dragged the French team back from the brink, forcing a 3-3 draw in extra time. But despite his superhuman efforts on the pitch, France ultimately lost to Argentina in a pretty devastating penalty shootout.
And what followed that loss was incredibly revealing. The immediate, vitriolic backlash forces us to ask a really tough question. If Kylian Mbappé, a generational talent, an absolute national icon, and literally the most expensive player in football history, isn't safe from racist abuse the minute he loses, who actually is? It completely shatters the illusion that having immense athletic success somehow buys you permanent acceptance.
Because the fallout was swift and it was global. In Buenos Aires, Argentine fans were seen burning a makeshift coffin with Mbappé's face on it. During the victory parade, Argentine goalkeeper Emiliano Martinez explicitly mocked Mbappé by carrying around a baby doll with the striker's face taped right to it. But honestly, perhaps the most damning part was that within France itself, players like Kingsley Coman and Aurelien Tchouameni, who missed crucial penalties in that shootout, were immediately hit with a massive wave of severe online racial abuse from their own supposed fans. Mbappé's response to all this chaos, just a defiant vow posted online, "We will return." But, the damage was already done.
Which leads us right into Section 3, conditional citizenship.
This crazy juxtaposition, being heralded as a national savior one minute and then getting subjected to overt racist mockery the very next, it exposes a profound paradox. And honestly, nobody has summarized this reality more bluntly than star French striker Karim Benzema. Speaking right before the 2014 tournament, he stated, "If I score, I'm French. If I don't, I'm an Arab." That quote is just incredibly powerful. It hits the nail right on the head, showing exactly how a player's national identity is actively weaponized. It suggests that for minorities in France, their Frenchness isn't this innate right of birth, but more like a temporary privilege that depends entirely on their athletic success and public behavior.
Decolonial thinkers look at this whole dynamic and they describe that colorblind Republican ideal, the one the French ambassador was defending, as a model of acculturation. Basically, this model demands that minorities push their cultural, religious, and ancestral heritage entirely into the private sphere, all to maintain the supposedly neutral public identity. But as the lived reality of these players clearly shows, the very second they fail to deliver a shiny trophy, that neutrality completely vanishes, and they are immediately defined by their race and origin.
So the absolutely crucial takeaway here is that these athletes often find themselves treated almost like probationary citizens. When they win, like they did in 1998 and 2018, they are elevated as the glorious shining face of French diversity. It's seen as proof that the colorblind republic works perfectly. But the minute they lose, or worse, when they dare to speak out about inequality, they're instantly reduced to their immigrant roots. It proves that for many of these guys, their belonging in the society they literally represent on the world stage is effectively on probation.
Which leaves us with this final profound thought to take away from the sources we've analyzed today. France has won the World Cup twice. Both times, the team that won it looked nothing like the France that celebrated it. That gap is not football's problem. It is Europe's.